currently 5:31 a.m. in the morning, East Coast time. A lot of you guys are probably watching this like, JT, why are you up recording this early in the morning or this late at night? Well, listen, do you guys ever lay down and you're dozing off, and while you're dozing off, you just have all these ideas, all these questions running through your head? And the question that ran through my head was, why did Jameis Winston fail in Tampa Bay? And I mean, this is a really interesting question because it is a lot of factors that played into why Jameis Winston didn't work out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it's similar to like a toxic relationship. In your toxic relationship, you meet your spouse or you meet your significant other, and the relationship starts off really good. That spouse or your significant other that you meet looks like they could be your soulmate. They could be the person that you settle down, have kids with, have a family with, and get married with. But then the relationship starts to have a little bit of some rocky patches. You get into a couple of arguments, you get into a couple of disagreements, but you bounce back, and then your significant other goes back to the person that you envisioned, settling down with. And then it happens again. Then you're having shouting matches, and it's just toxic all the way around. And then you go to seek help. You get the best therapist or the best relationship counselor available, and even they can't solve your relationship problem. So what happens after that? You have to cut your ties. You just have to say, hey, I'm done. And I think this is kind of the situation that happened in Tampa Bay with Jameis Winston. When Tampa Bay Buccaneers drafted Jameis Winston number 1 overall a couple of years back, Jameis Winston was envisioned to be a guy who was a turnover machine at Florida State. And although he did turn the football over a lot at Florida State, and Florida State was always down because of the turnovers, he was able to rally Florida State and bring Florida State back in nearly every single game. So, I mean, you could see the talent there. You could see the potential. You could see the upside. And if you're Tampa Bay, can you blame them? If you're Tampa Bay, you're saying, man, we could have this all-world quarterback. All we just need is a head coach who can come in and fix his turnover problems. So, I mean, like all toxic relationships, they all start out pretty good. Jameis Winston in 2015, his rookie season, was a Pro Bowler. Then Tampa Bay gets rid of Lovie Smith. They say, you know what? We don't think Lovie Smith is the guy who can get Jameis Winston to that next level. So you bring in Dirk Koetter. Now, what is Dirk Koetter? Dirk Koetter is an aggressive head coach. He is a coach who likes to take a lot of shots deep. And, his emphasis is more of a pass first, approach. And Tampa Bay, they didn't really have a lot of emphasis on the run game. And, the offensive line wasn't all that great. Now, Jameis Winston had an amazing group of wide receivers. During the Dirk Koetter era, who did they have? They had Mike Evans and they had Deshaun Jackson, were the guys who were the two best wide receivers on Tampa Bay's roster during Dirk Koetter's tenure there. So, the first season under Dirk Koetter starts off great. Tampa Bay comes close to making it to the playoffs in 2016. And then after that, things pretty much fell apart. You had injuries on Jameis Winston's part, and you also had off-the-field issues with Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston, with the off-the-field issues, kind of lost the locker room a little bit. So then Ryan Fitzpatrick comes in, right? And Ryan Fitzpatrick, is doing Ryan Fitzpatrick things. Ryan Fitzmagic comes in, and what Ryan Fitzpatrick does. He has these crazy games that he just goes ballistic. He looks like an MVP candidate. But then, like always, Ryan Fitzmagic, eventually magic runs out. So then Dirk Koetter inserts Jameis Winston. And then Jameis Winston is doing what Jameis Winston does the best. He's having great games, and he's turning the football over. So then Dirk Koetter, puts back in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then he puts back in Jameis Winston. And I feel Dirk Koetter went about handling the Jameis Winston incident the wrong way. And I mean, look, besides from Jameis Winston's off-the-field issues, I mean, on the field, he wasn't really progressing all that much because he was still the same quarterback that he was when he got drafted first overall by Tampa Bay coming out of Florida State. Turnover prone with a lot of upside. Good plays, but you had a lot of bad plays. And those bad plays costed Tampa Bay a lot of games. And plus you had Dirk Koetter, who wasn't really all that great of a coach. He was a good play caller, but he didn't know how to manage personalities. He didn't really know how to, run a team. And being a good head coach is more about, knowing X's and O's and calling plays. You're managing a lot of personalities. You're managing guys who are like 30 years old, 20 years old. You're managing all kinds of personalities. And Dirk Koetter simply wasn't able to do that. So then, Dirk Koetter And his final year in Tampa Bay, it just absolutely stinks. And Tampa Bay says, you know what? We're going to see the ultimate help. We're going to go to the quarterback whisperer. We're going to bring Bruce Arians out of retirement. And we're going to see if he can fix Jameis Winston. And by the way, Bruce Arians had several teams that he could have coached. He had several opportunities. He chose Tampa Bay for Jameis Winston. He loved Jameis Winston. He felt that he could get the most out of Jameis Winston because he was able to resurrect Carson Palmer's career. Look what he was able to do with Andrew Luck. So, I mean, Bruce Arians takes the job, but I don't think Bruce Arians realized what he was getting himself into with Jameis Winston. And it was like a headache because you know, a couple of weeks you see all this potential. He's having great games, but then you have a couple of games when he's just turning the football over and he looks like a bust. And I mean, like a toxic relationship, you go and you get the best counselor available, but even the best counselor available wasn't able to fix the relationship. And eventually the relationship had to end. And Bruce Arians was the best head coach that Tampa Bay could have got to, you know, fix Jameis Winston and get Jameis Winston playing like the level that Tampa Bay expected him to play when they drafted him number 1 overall, but that wasn't able to happen. And this isn't all on Jameis Winston. Tampa Bay also failed too because just because you have the coach, you still have to have the pieces in place. I mean, in the NFL, you got to be balanced. Now, you can be a pass-first offense, you know, like Kansas City, but you also have to be able to keep the defense balanced, and you do have to have a little bit of a ground game. And when you have Bruce Arians, he is an aggressive head coach. He's a super aggressive coach, and you pair him up for super aggressive quarterback, you're in for, you know, a roller coaster of a season. You got a coach that loves to have the big play, and you got a quarterback that loves to throw the big play. And with that comes a high-risk, high-reward offense. And that's what you got. And that's reflected in Jameis Winston's 2019 stats. Over 5,000 passing yards, over 30 touchdowns, and 30 interceptions. You got exactly what you was asking for. You got a high-risk, high-reward. And I mean, you got a guy in Jameis Winston who had a lot of great plays and a lot of bad plays. So, I mean, overall, Tampa Bay didn't do Jameis Winston no favors at all because I know I was talking about Jameis Winston and the off-the-field issues, but look, what did Tampa Bay do to help Jameis Winston when it came to a talent standpoint? All they did was give him wide receivers, but the offensive line was never all that great, and he didn't really have a legitimate running game. And Tampa Bay just got too one-dimensional. It doesn't matter if you're a pass-first offense or not. You got to have some kind of balance. And the defenses just knew that, you know, Tampa Bay was just going to air the football out. So all defensive coordinators had to plan for was to stop the pass. And when you have a quarterback like Jameis Winston, I feel the best way to develop a quarterback like Jameis Winston is by starting him out, you know, kind of taking the ball out of his hands and running the football. Similar to the approach that Jacksonville Jaguars took in 2017 with Blake Bortles. Or was it 2018? I don't remember. 27, whichever year the Jacksonville Jaguars went to the AFC Championship game. They won games by running the football and only utilizing Blake Bortles when they needed to. And I feel that's kind of what's the approach that Tampa Bay should have went when it came to Jameis Winston. I feel like them not really having that great of a run game kind of put the ball in Jameis Winston's hands all too much. And then, you know, Jameis Winston was a guy who, you know, still hasn't really developed all that much, still thinking that he needs to have the big play to win the games and still not really having the ability to dissect coverages and know where to go with the football. So, I mean, if Tampa Bay was able to get Jameis Winston a legitimate run game, I think that Jameis Winston may have developed a little bit better. Because then, you know, the more seasons that you progress in, you know, the more responsibilities you can hand Jameis Winston. But it seems like Tampa Bay just said, hey, we got Jameis Winston. We're just going to go all in. We're just going to go air it out. And I mean, since they never really gave, you know, Jameis Winston a legitimate run game, he basically would have had the ball in his hands a lot more often than what he should be. You see, when you have a young quarterback, I feel like, listen, I understand you have a young quarterback. He has to be able to make some plays, but a good way to help out a young quarterback is by giving him a good running game. Don't make that quarterback feel like he has to do it all to win football games. Like Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray in his rookie season had a top 10 rushing attack. And you look, although Indianapolis' offensive line was terrible, the coach wasn't great, he had an okay rushing attack his first year in the NFL. So, I mean, that's how you get the most out of a quarterback that is turnover prone. Look at Ben Roethlisberger with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He started out having a great run game with Jerome Bettis, and Pittsburgh was a smash mouth football team. Then, after about 2010, 2011, they started letting Ben Roethlisberger air the football out anymore because they trusted him. He was at that point of his career that you should be able to have the ball in his hands. He should be able to go and win you the ball game. But Tampa Bay never really got Jameis Winston to that point. And I feel like although you went out and you got the counseling needed, you didn't really have the pieces set in place. And eventually, Bruce Arians realized, he said, hey, I can't fix Jameis Winston. I know I'm the quarterback whisperer, but I got the most out of Jameis Winston. I got the best out of him, and I got the worst out of him. So in terms of why Jameis Winston failed in Tampa, it's kind of a mixture of both. Jameis Winston has his off-the-field issues, never really quite developed into the quarterback that Tampa Bay was expecting him to be. Then you got Tampa Bay. You got the coaches, but you didn't really surround them with all the necessary pieces. You always had a great group of wide receivers, but you didn't have a great offensive line, and you weren't really able to give him a great running game. So it's a mixture of both. So, you guys let me know why Jameis Winston failed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm interested to see what you guys have to say on this. Make sure that you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content, and thanks for watching.